If you've been around the block, you know about the Rotax name. But what you may not know is the impact that this company's had on the success of other motorcycle companies such as Aprilia. They've been across the pond in Austria quietly toiling on their craft while everybody else gets the credit. But behind the scenes, Rotax has made reliable, versatile, and amazing motorcycle engines that have changed the trajectory of the industry for the better. So let's give credit where credit is due. Let's talk about Rotax. Rotax was founded in 1920 in Dresden, Germany, originally manufacturing parts for bicycles. The name Rotax is a portmanteau of rotanda and axis, part of a bicycle's freewheel. That's a fun fact for you today. And you could say things got a little turbulent in Germany during this time between the 1920s and 1940s. Rotax was owned by a few different companies and moved around during World War II. They eventually settled in Gunskirchen, Austria, where they're still headquartered today. They changed hands a few times before ultimately being purchased by Bombardier, who currently owns Sea-Doo and Can-Am in 1970. They currently operate as BRP Rotax, and they make stuff like go-karts, snowmobiles, jet skis, and light aircraft, but not much in the way of motorcycle engines anymore. But in the not-so-distant past, Rotax was making some incredibly competitive motorcycle power plants being found in some of the most interesting models available on showroom floors at the time. And it begs the question, why do these companies choose Rotax? Building a motorcycle engine from scratch to fit into thousands, if not millions of models requires a ton of R&D, millions of dollars, and some expertise. Rotax offered customers turnkey solutions for this. And best of all, these engines were reliable and powerful. Brands could launch much faster using off-the-shelf Rotax engines or some with light modifications. Rotax offered engines in various configurations: 2-stroke, 4-stroke, singles, parallel twins, and even some V-twin models. Manufacturers like Buell, BMW, and even Aprilia all offered models using Rotax engine in some way, shape, or form in the last 30 years. So let's talk about Aprilia first, because they really are an interesting case study about how in the 90s and the 2000s, they used Rotax engines to give themselves an improvement in reliability and create models that could have long-standing success. Letting Rotax handle the dirty work of making an engine allowed Aprilia to be a very competitive manufacturer. The use of Rotax engines was critical in Aprilia's rise from a pretty niche manufacturer in Italy to a serious global competitor. And Rotax didn't just provide engines. What they allowed Aprilia to do was focus on what they were really good at, developing chassis, the geometry, the ergonomics, the styling, and the racecraft of the bike. In case you didn't know, Aprilia was pretty darn good at building 2-stroke race bikes for Grand Prix racing. Aprilia just didn't have the resources to design, manufacture, and source materials for engine development in the 80s and the 90s. By outsourcing this development to Rotax, Aprilia could then focus more on chassis development, tuning the suspension, and other elements of making the motorcycle better. And this was especially crucial as Aprilia was transitioning from making high-strung 2-stroke little race bikes to 4-stroke offerings in the 90s. Rotax engines were reliable, powerful, and versatile. Their engines had a reputation for easy maintenance, longevity, and great power-to-weight ratio characteristics. The Rotax 652 single used in the Aprilia Pegaso and the BMW F650 was very well regarded. But listen, no matter who makes the engine in your motorcycle, it's guaranteed that it has tires. And what do those tires need? Air. And what are you gonna do? Use a ratty old pump to fill them up? Or are you gonna go to the gas station to get free air? Nonsense. You're gonna get yourself a Fanttik tire inflator. You're a big-brained motorcyclist, and I know you want to do the best for your ride. Everyone in our crew rocks a Fanttik. We just chuck it into the back of our tail bags and call it a day. The X9 is actually a great piece of kit because of its small form factor but significant power output. This unit can inflate to 150 psi. With intelligent mode, you just set the psi, hit the button, and wait for it to fill your tire up to the pressure. The X9's advanced cooling abilities actually allow it to run for 23 minutes without shutting off. So if you've got multiple bikes or a car that you need to inflate the tires on, you can rest assured the Fanttik is going to work without overheating or shutting off. If you want a sweet deal on a new Fanttik X9 tire inflator, hit the link down below and get access to their 5-year anniversary sale. Get 33% off an X9 portable air inflator using the code YAMMYX9 at checkout. So you hit the link below, use the code YAMMYX9 and get yourself 33% off your Fanttik air inflator. That's the best deal I can get for you. Thanks so much for Fanttik for supporting the show. Let's get back into talking about Rotax. So as previously mentioned, Aprilia's long-standing claim to fame was building incredible two-stroke race bikes. Aprilia's RS125 is an iconic two-stroke GP-styled machine, and it was actually powered by a 125cc Rotax engine. This little thing was capable of making 28 horsepower of a 125cc two-stroke and 14 foot-pounds of torque. It was so legendary that Aprilia ran it largely unchanged for 20 years. Many legendary racers have swung a leg over an RS125, including our Lord and Savior, Valentino Rossi. But the RSV Miele is really where we started to see Aprilia take form as we know them in the modern era. The RSV Miele, powered by a 990cc Rotax 60-degree V-twin, was the bike that took it to other motorcycles in World Superbike, competing against the Ducati 996 and the Japanese inline fours. And it wasn't just a street bike, it was a genuine homologated race bike that proved that Aprilia could hang with the big boys while still selling something fun and streetable. Without Rotax, Aprilia would not have had the tech to make that leap. And look, we all love the in-house Aprilia-made engines nowadays, the incredible sonorous soundtrack of the RSV4's V4 power plant, the grumbly character of the RS660's twin, and even the new RS457 has lots of charm featuring a 270 crank. But it's fair to say, without the RSV Miele, we may not have any of those bikes nowadays. The Miele launched in 1998, and it was the first large displacement four-stroke motorcycle made by Aprilia. It was capable of 128 horsepower and 78 foot-pounds of torque. The bike debuted in World Superbike for the 1999 season. And look, it didn't have the dominance of the Ducati 996 or the RC51 from Honda, but it was reasonably successful and even snagged a podium. Despite pulling out of World Superbike in 2002, this laid the groundwork for what would come later with the RSV4. Aprilia also produced the Pegaso. The Pegaso is a sort of dual sport / motard style motorcycle that was made in the late 1990s into the 2000s. It's one of the more underappreciated but interesting motorcycles in Aprilia's history, especially because of the Rotax engine, the evolution of Aprilia at that time, and the changing tides of the dual sport market. It was Aprilia's first big volume four-stroke machine, way before the RSV Miele. The 652cc single-cylinder Rotax engine was good for about 50 horsepower. It demonstrated that Aprilia could build reliable, good street bikes and not necessarily just crazy race replica machines. And in many ways, Rotax was the silent partner behind Aprilia's success. Aprilia got the spotlights with its bold designs, sharp handling, and MotoGP presence. But without reliable competitive engines, none of that would have mattered. Rotax provided the engineering backbone that Aprilia needed to compete against Ducati, KTM, and many other formidable competitors. And while the next bike is technically branded as a BMW, Aprilia isn't entirely separate of the F650 Funduro. Oh, I'm glad BMW gave it a rest with those kind of names. The BMW F650 was powered by a 652cc single-cylinder engine making about 50 horsepower and was a sort of dual sport motard-esque concept. Sound familiar? The Funduro was essentially a Pegaso that was reskinned and sold by BMW, but it was built by Aprilia themselves until BMW took over in the 2000s. And since BMW only knew how to build boxers and inline fours, outsourcing to Rotax and Aprilia made a lot of sense and let them keep focusing on making 600-pound shaft-driven bikes. And because the Funduro wasn't really a BMW at all, it had many firsts for the company. It was their first chain-driven motorcycle, it was their first single-cylinder, and without having to plunk down all that cost for R&D and engine development, it was certainly an opportunity for them to sell something different. Now, the Rotax story cannot be told without talking about Buell. The Eric Buell Racing 1125R was a pretty crazy turning point for the company after those turbulent years with Harley-Davidson. At its core was a Rotax-built engine, and that engine symbolized much more than just performance. It represented freedom from Harley's constraints and a glimpse at what Buell could achieve with real engineering autonomy. The Rotax-built 1125cc 72-degree V-twin made about 146 horsepower and 82 foot-pounds of torque, a massive leap from the 1200cc Evo engines that Buell was restricted to prior. The Helicon engine was built exclusively for Buell by Rotax in Austria. It was capable of 10,500 plus RPM, which was way beyond what the Harley motors could ever even dream of. It gave Buell a legitimate entry into the 1000cc plus big V twin category that was happening at the time. It let Buell compete with the Japanese leader bikes, with the Ducati Big Twins, and even the KTM RC8R at the time. The engines used in the newest Buell iteration are strikingly similar to the old Helicon engines, leading many to speculate that they're probably still using something very similar today. So why is there no more Rotax? What happened? Well, when a motorcycle manufacturer reaches a certain level of profitability, it just makes sense to start developing your engines in-house. Aprilia makes their own engines now, BMW's making their own liquid-cooled parallel twins, and they just kind of moved on. As emissions regulations tighten more and more, it makes less sense to outsource your engine. Every year you see engineers trying to manage the interplay between engine, exhaust, and fuel mapping. You need a tight control over these systems to make sure that you meet compliance. And if you outsource your engine constantly, you're not going to be able to do that. In-house manufacturing is also very important to a brand's perception and identity. Consumers expect motorcycle manufacturers to make their own engines. In-house engines give OEMs full control over tuning, performance characteristics, and weight. And with the proliferation of cross-platforming engines, manufacturers have the ability to build one engine to suit multiple chassis as well. Think of something like Yamaha's CP2 that finds its way in many models across the range. As engines become less specialized, they become more cost-effective to produce. If you can put the same engine in slightly different varying states of tune across many different motorcycle models, you're going to save money. And as for Rotax, their attention has shifted to their in-house brands such as Can-Am and Sea-Doo, where they're producing engines for ATVs, side-by-sides, and jet skis. So in conclusion, Rotax gave small manufacturers a chance to compete in the late 90s and early 2000s. They gave these manufacturers a fighting chance in a pivotal stage of development during their company's stories. Without Rotax, the 125/250cc two-stroke craze might have never reached the peak that we saw. Rotax's 652cc single kind of defined the category of these big thumpers back in the 2000s with the Pegaso and the Funduro. And while their influence is indisputable, their presence in motorcycling just doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. But that's not to say they didn't pull their weight and help make some of the most iconic and interesting motorcycle models to ever be created. So let me know what you think about Rotax in the comments down below. Do you own a Rotax powered bike? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Anything we missed in today's video, let us know in the comments down below. We appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.